Hey there, history enthusiasts. Tonight we're embarking on a journey that will strip away the romanticized myths and dive deep into the brutal realities of human endurance across the ages. Forget the heroic tales and noble sacrifices you've seen in movies. We're talking about worlds where childhood was a luxury warriors couldn't afford, where scientific progress came at the cost of human dignity, and where survival required fundamental changes in human nature itself. But that's just the beginning. We'll also uncover the razor-sharp social commentary hidden in genteel drawing rooms, marvel at garden paradises that transform deserts into earthly heaven, witness communities devoting centuries to build monuments they'd never see completed, and trace how the simple act of making cloth drove some of history's greatest innovations and cruelest exploitations. So settle in, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey through time that will challenge everything you thought you knew about human achievement and sacrifice. We'll explore the Spartan Agogge that turned 7-year-old boys into killing machines, Jane Austen's subversive critique of her entire society, Persian gardens that demonstrated godlike power over nature, medieval cathedrals that required faith across generations, and textile production that both clothed civilization and powered its darkest impulses. Because after tonight, you'll understand that progress has always come at costs we rarely acknowledge, that the most beautiful achievements often rest on foundations of suffering, and that human societies can create systems so demanding that they test the very limits of what it means to be human. Welcome to 5 moments when survival itself required becoming something your former self would find unrecognizable. At age 7, while modern children are learning to read and write, Spartan boys were taken from their mothers and thrust into the Agogge, a military education system so ruthless that it would break most adults before they understood what was happening to them. This wasn't summer camp or boarding school, but a systematic process designed to strip away everything that made these children individuals and rebuild them as components in the most efficient killing machine the ancient world had ever seen. You might think you could survive the Agogge based on your knowledge of military training or survival experiences, but the Spartan system wasn't designed to improve strong individuals. It was engineered to eliminate weakness at its source, killing or crippling those who couldn't adapt, while transforming survivors into warriors who value death in battle above life in comfort. The boys who entered the Agogge as children emerged as young men who were no longer entirely human in any sense we would recognize. Welcome to ancient Sparta, where childhood was considered a luxury that warriors couldn't afford, where survival required learning to endure pain, hunger, and violence as normal conditions of existence, and where the greatest honor was to die fighting rather than live in defeat. This was the forge that created the 300 warriors who held Thermopylae, but the price of their valor was paid by thousands of children who were broken by a system that transformed human beings into weapons. The Agogge began with a ritual that would traumatize most modern parents. 7-year-old boys were literally torn from their mother's arms and taken to military barracks, where they would live for the next 13 years of their lives. This separation wasn't gradual or gentle. It was designed to sever emotional bonds that Spartan society considered weaknesses that could interfere with military effectiveness. The psychological impact of this sudden separation was devastating and intentional. Boys who had known only maternal love and family protection were immediately thrust into an environment where emotional expression was forbidden, comfort was non-existent, and survival depended on suppressing every natural human instinct for affection, security, and individual identity. The barracks where these children lived were deliberately harsh, with minimal shelter from weather, inadequate bedding, and living conditions designed to prepare them for military campaigns where comfort would be unavailable. Boys slept on beds made of rushes. They had to gather themselves often in unheated buildings that provided little protection from Greece's cold winters. Food was intentionally insufficient, forcing boys to become resourceful in supplementing their rations through hunting, foraging, and theft. This chronic hunger wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate policy designed to teach self-reliance while eliminating physical weakness through a form of controlled starvation that killed weaker children while strengthening survivors. The supervision provided in these barracks came from older boys rather than adults, creating hierarchical systems where younger children learned submission and obedience, while older students practiced leadership through the exercise of arbitrary power over their juniors. This system eliminated adult compassion while teaching that authority derived from strength rather than wisdom or moral character. The clothing provided to AGOGE participants was minimal and inadequate for weather protection, forcing boys to develop tolerance for cold heat and physical discomfort that would serve them in military campaigns. They received one cloak per year and were forbidden from wearing additional clothing regardless of weather conditions. Personal possessions were virtually eliminated as boys were allowed to keep only the most basic necessities, while being forbidden from acquiring comfort items or personal luxuries that might soften their conditioning. This material deprivation was designed to eliminate attachment to physical objects, while teaching that warriors needed nothing beyond their weapons and basic survival gear. The emotional isolation created by the AGOGE system extended beyond separation from family to include prohibition of friendships, romantic attachments, or any relationships that might compete with loyalty to the state. Boys learned that emotional connections were vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit, and that true warriors needed no one except their fellow soldiers. The daily routine imposed on AGOGE participants was designed to eliminate personal preference and individual initiative while creating automatic obedience to authority figures and established procedures. Every moment was scheduled and regulated, leaving no opportunity for independent thought or spontaneous activity that might develop individual personality traits. Physical conditioning in the AGOGE involved exercises and challenges that went far beyond normal athletic training to include deliberate exposure to pain, injury, and exhaustion that taught boys to function effectively despite physical suffering. This conditioning wasn't designed to build strong bodies, but to create minds that could ignore physical limitations and continue fighting despite serious wounds. The running exercises required of AGOGE participants involved long-distance races conducted barefoot over rough terrain, often while carrying heavy equipment or wearing armor that made the physical demands nearly unbearable. These runs continued regardless of weather conditions, injuries, or individual physical limitations that might prevent completion. Wrestling and combat sports were conducted without protective equipment and with minimal rules, resulting in frequent serious injuries that were considered educational experiences rather than accidents to be prevented. Boys learned to ignore pain while continuing to fight effectively, despite broken bones, cuts, and other injuries that would disable untrained individuals. Swimming training involved exercises in cold water that taught temperature tolerance while developing the aquatic skills necessary for amphibious military operations. Boys were expected to complete these exercises regardless of weather conditions or their individual swimming abilities, with drowning considered evidence of personal inadequacy rather than systemic failure. Endurance challenges included forced marches, obstacle courses, and survival exercises that pushed physical capabilities beyond normal human limits while teaching that failure was unacceptable regardless of circumstances. These challenges were designed to identify and eliminate boys who couldn't meet military standards while conditioning survivors to exceed ordinary human performance. The pain tolerance developed through AGOGE training was legendary, even in the ancient world, as Spartan boys learned to endure torture, injury, and suffering without showing weakness or asking for relief. This tolerance was developed through gradual exposure to increasing levels of pain that desensitized participants while teaching that physical suffering was irrelevant to military effectiveness. Weapon training began with simple implements and progressed to the complex armaments that defined Spartan military effectiveness. But this training emphasized mental conditioning as much as physical skill development. Boys learned to view weapons as extensions of their bodies, while developing the psychological readiness to kill human beings without hesitation or moral doubt. The competitive elements of AGOGE training created intense rivalry among participants, while eliminating cooperative relationships that might soften military conditioning. Boys competed for limited resources, recognition, and advancement opportunities that were awarded based on demonstrated hardness rather than compassion or moral character. Combat training in the AGOGE involved actual fighting with weapons that could cause serious injury or death, as Spartan educators believed that training needed to replicate the deadly realities of warfare rather than providing safe simulations of military conflict. Boys learned to fight with spears, swords and shields in exercises that regularly resulted in permanent disabilities or fatalities. The spear combat training that formed the core of Spartan military education involved formation fighting that required perfect coordination and unwavering discipline under conditions that simulated actual battle. Boys learned to maintain precise positions and execute complex maneuvers while being attacked by opponents trying to break their formations through violence and intimidation. Shield work was particularly emphasized because Spartan military doctrine depended on hoplite formations where individual survival depended on collective discipline and mutual protection. Boys learned that abandoning their shields meant abandoning their comrades, making shield loss the ultimate military and moral failure that could result in execution or permanent exile. Sword training focused on close-quarters combat skills needed when spear formations broke down and fighting became individual contests of strength, skill, and determination. This training emphasized killing techniques rather than defensive strategies, teaching boys that the best protection came from eliminating enemies rather than avoiding conflict. The psychological conditioning associated with weapon training was designed to overcome natural human reluctance to kill other human beings, replacing normal moral restraints with automatic aggressive responses that functioned without conscious thought. Boys learned to attack human targets without hesitation while suppressing empathy that might interfere with effective killing. Mock battles conducted as part of AGOGE training involved full-contact combat between teams of boys using real weapons and tactics with casualties considered acceptable costs of military education. These exercises taught practical combat skills while demonstrating that Spartan society valued military effectiveness above individual safety or survival. The leadership training provided in the AGOGE emphasized command under pressure rather than administrative or diplomatic skills, teaching boys to make rapid decisions during violent confrontations while maintaining authority over subordinates who might panic or break under stress. This leadership education focused on battlefield command rather than broader military or political strategy. The advanced combat training provided to older AGOGE participants included specialized techniques for different types of warfare, from siege operations to naval combat, while emphasizing adaptability and improvisation under changing battlefield conditions. Boys learned that military effectiveness required flexibility within disciplined frameworks rather than rigid adherence to predetermined tactics. The relationship between Spartan warriors and Helot slaves created one of the most disturbing aspects of the AGOGE system, as boys were taught to view an entire population as subhuman enemies who deserved brutalization rather than protection. This relationship served both practical and psychological functions in Spartan military education. The Helots, who outnumbered Spartans by approximately 7-1, represented a constant security threat that required vigilant suppression through violence and intimidation. AGOGE participants learned to view Helots as dangerous animals who would revolt and murder Spartans if given any opportunity, making preemptive violence not just acceptable but necessary for survival. The annual declaration of war against Helots provided legal justification for killing slaves without legal consequences, creating opportunities for AGOGE participants to practice murder while eliminating potential resistance leaders among the slave population. These killings served as practical training exercises that desensitized boys to human suffering while reducing actual security threats. The Krypteia, or secret police operations conducted by advanced AGOGE participants, involved hunting and killing Helots in organized campaigns that combined military training with population control. These operations taught stealth tracking and assassination skills while reinforcing beliefs about Spartan superiority and Helot subhumanity. The economic relationships that made AGOGE training possible depended on Helot labor that freed Spartan citizens from productive work while generating the agricultural surplus needed to support a professional military class. Boys learned that their military training was subsidized by slave labor while developing contempt for productive work as beneath warrior dignity. The psychological impact of Helot interactions on AGOGE participants was complex and disturbing, as boys learned to compartmentalize their capacity for human empathy while developing skills in violence and intimidation that became central to their adult identities. These relationships taught that some human beings deserved compassion, while others deserved only exploitation and violence. The sexual abuse of Helot women by Spartan men was considered normal and acceptable, teaching Agoge participants that power gave them unlimited authority over weaker individuals, while reinforcing beliefs about natural hierarchies that justified exploitation. These relationships demonstrated how military training could corrupt moral development while providing outlets for psychological damage created by harsh conditioning. The Helot revolts that periodically threatened Spartan security provided practical experience in counterinsurgency operations while demonstrating the consequences of successful slave resistance. Agoge participants learned to suppress these revolts with extreme violence, while understanding that their survival depended on maintaining absolute dominance over the enslaved population. The cultural interactions between Spartans and Helots were minimal and carefully controlled, as social contact that might humanize slaves was considered dangerous to military effectiveness. Boys learned to avoid relationships that might create empathy while maintaining the psychological distance necessary for effective oppression. The economic exploitation of Helots provided Spartan society with the material foundation for its military culture, while teaching Agoge participants that warrior status exempted them from productive labor. This exemption created both practical advantages and psychological dependencies that made Spartan society vulnerable to economic disruption. The legal status of Helots, as state property rather than individual slaves, meant that their treatment was determined by collective Spartan interests, rather than individual owners' preferences, creating systematic oppression that served military training purposes while maintaining economic productivity. The preparation for actual warfare that culminated Agoge training involved exercises designed to simulate the psychological and physical stresses of real combat, while teaching boys to function effectively under conditions that would break ordinary human beings. These preparations combined practical military skills with mental conditioning that transformed normal human responses to danger and violence. The mock siege operations conducted as part of advanced Agoge training involved complex military engineering and tactics that prepared boys for the realities of fortress warfare while teaching them to overcome fortified positions through superior discipline and tactical innovation. These exercises demonstrated how Spartan military doctrine could overcome numerical disadvantages through superior training and organization. The amphibious warfare training that prepared Spartans for naval operations involved swimming in armor ship-to-ship combat and beach assault tactics that required exceptional physical conditioning and mental toughness. This training acknowledged that military effectiveness required adaptation to different combat environments while maintaining core warrior values. The wilderness survival training that tested Agoge participants' ability to function independently involved extended periods in mountainous terrain with minimal equipment and no external support. Boys learned to find food, water, and shelter while avoiding detection by hostile forces that might capture or kill them. The psychological warfare training provided to advanced Agoge participants included techniques for intimidating enemies, maintaining morale under adverse conditions, and exploiting enemy weaknesses through superior mental preparation. This training recognized that military effectiveness depended as much on psychological factors as on physical capabilities. The tactical education provided in the Agoge emphasized flexibility within disciplined frameworks, teaching boys to adapt standard procedures to changing battlefield conditions while maintaining the unit cohesion that made Spartan military doctrine effective. This education balanced innovation with conformity in ways that maximized combat effectiveness. The weapons maintenance training that prepared boys for military service included metalworking, leather craft, and other technical skills needed to maintain equipment under field conditions. This training emphasized self-reliance while teaching that warrior effectiveness depended on attention to practical details as well as combat skills. The medical training provided to Agoge participants included battlefield surgery, wound treatment, and disease prevention techniques that would enable them to continue fighting despite injuries while providing minimal care for wounded comrades. This medical education focused on maintaining combat effectiveness rather than comprehensive health care. The honor code that governed Spartan military behavior emphasized death in battle as preferable to survival in defeat, creating psychological conditioning that made retreat or surrender virtually impossible for properly trained warriors. This honor system provided motivation for extraordinary battlefield performance while making certain that Spartan soldiers would fight to the death rather than accept defeat. The return with your shield or on it mentality that characterized Spartan military culture meant that survival without victory was considered worse than death, creating warriors who would continue fighting under conditions where other soldiers would surrender or retreat. This mentality was instilled through years of conditioning that made personal survival secondary to military honor. The cult of heroic death that permeated Spartan culture provided meaning and purpose for warriors who expected to die young while achieving glory through military achievement. This death cult made soldiers eager for opportunities to prove their worth through sacrifice, while eliminating fear of mortality that might interfere with aggressive tactics. The religious aspects of Spartan military culture included beliefs about warrior afterlife and divine favor that reinforced the honor code while providing spiritual justification for extreme violence and sacrifice. These religious beliefs integrated military training with cosmic significance while making warfare a form of religious devotion. The family relationships maintained by Spartan warriors were subordinated to military obligations, with wives and children expected to support warrior culture while accepting that military duty took precedence over domestic relationships. This subordination ensured that family ties wouldn't interfere with military effectiveness while creating generations committed to warrior values. The economic implications of Spartan military culture created a society completely dependent on military success for survival, as the helot system that supported warrior training would collapse if Spartan military dominance were ever broken. This dependence made military effectiveness a matter of survival rather than choice, while creating powerful incentives for maintaining warrior culture. The graduation from Agoge training at age 20 marked the beginning, rather than the end, of military obligation, as young Spartans entered a lifetime of military service that would define their entire adult existence. This transition from training to service demonstrated that the Agoge was just preparation for a life devoted entirely to warfare and military readiness. The adult military service that followed Agoge training involved constant preparation for warfare through daily exercises, strategic planning, and maintenance of equipment and skills needed for effective combat. Adult Spartans lived in a state of permanent military readiness that made them the most formidable soldiers in the ancient world. The leadership positions available to successful Agoge graduates provided opportunities for advancement within a military hierarchy that valued combat effectiveness above all other qualifications. These leadership roles required demonstrated bravery, tactical skill, and absolute commitment to Spartan military values. The veteran status achieved by Spartans who survived multiple military campaigns provided respect and authority within Spartan society, while demonstrating that the Agoge system could produce warriors capable of extraordinary military achievement. These veterans served as models for younger soldiers while maintaining the warrior culture that defined Spartan identity. The long-term consequences of Agoge training affected not just individual Spartans but their entire society, creating a military culture so effective that it dominated Greek warfare for centuries while producing warriors whose discipline and courage became legendary throughout the ancient world. The psychological costs of the Agoge system were enormous, as the conditioning required to create effective warriors also created individuals who were severely damaged by modern psychological standards. The system that produced military excellence also eliminated many human qualities that other societies valued, including compassion, creativity, and emotional depth. The social costs of maintaining the Agoge system included the oppression of helots, the subordination of women, and the creation of a society so focused on military effectiveness that it neglected other forms of human achievement. These costs demonstrated how military excellence could be purchased at the price of broader human development. The ultimate failure of the Spartan system occurred when military defeats exposed the vulnerabilities created by excessive specialization and dependence on helot labor. The society that had created the most effective warriors in the ancient world collapsed when changing military technology and political conditions made its narrow focus on traditional warfare obsolete. Understanding the Agoge system helps modern people appreciate both the remarkable achievements possible through systematic training and the human costs of systems that prioritize collective effectiveness over individual welfare. The Spartan example demonstrates how societies can create extraordinary capabilities while destroying much of what makes life meaningful and humane. The legacy of Spartan military training continues to influence modern military education and popular culture, providing both inspiration for those who value discipline and sacrifice and warnings about the dangers of systems that dehumanize individuals in pursuit of collective goals. Standing today among the ruins of ancient Sparta, visitors can contemplate both the remarkable achievements and the terrible costs of a society that created the most effective warriors the world had ever seen, while sacrificing the childhood individuality and humanity of countless young people who paid the price for military excellence with their lives, their sanity, and their capacity for normal human relationships. The Agoge reminds us that human societies can achieve extraordinary things when they focus all their resources on specific goals, but that such achievements often come at costs that may not be justified by the results they produce. The warriors who emerged from this system were magnificent and terrible, demonstrating both human potential and human cruelty in ways that continue to fascinate and disturb us more than 2 millennia after the last Agoge graduate died in battle for a society that had forgotten how to value anything except the art of war. Jane Austen's hidden social commentary. Behind the elegant prose and seemingly genteel concerns of Jane Austen's novels lay one of the sharpest social critics in English literature, a writer whose delicate irony and subtle wit concealed devastating analyses of the corruption, inequality, and moral emptiness that characterized Regency England's polite society. While her contemporaries saw stories about young women seeking suitable marriages, Austen was actually dissecting a social system that reduced human beings to economic commodities while maintaining facades of refinement and moral superiority. You might think you know Jane Austen from popular adaptations that emphasize romance, beautiful costumes, and happy endings, but the original novels contain layers of social criticism so sophisticated and subversive that they challenged everything her society claimed to value while appearing to celebrate it. Her heroines weren't simply looking for love. They were navigating a social minefield where a wrong step could mean lifelong poverty, social ostracism, or economic dependence that destroyed personal autonomy. Welcome to the world of Jane Austen's England, where moral worth was measured by annual income, where women's intelligence was considered dangerous to social stability, and where the elegant manners that defined civilized society concealed systematic exploitation of the poor, the powerless, and the economically vulnerable. Behind the drawing room conversations and country house visits lay a critique of capitalism, class, privilege, and gender inequality that was radical for its time and remains relevant today. The social world that Jane Austen inhabited and critiqued was built on foundations of economic inequality so extreme that they created two entirely different societies occupying the same geographical space. The landed gentry who populate her novels lived lives of leisure, supported by agricultural rents extracted from tenant farmers' investment income from colonial plantations worked by enslaved people, and government sinecures that channeled tax revenue from working people to aristocratic families. This economic system created a paradox that Austen explored throughout her work. The people who considered themselves the moral leaders of society were often those who contributed least to its productive economy while extracting the greatest benefits from others' labor. The genteel characters who worry about propriety and moral behavior were supported by systems of exploitation that they preferred not to examine too closely. The rigid class distinctions that governed social interaction in Austen's world were maintained through elaborate codes of behavior that masked economic relationships behind facades of natural superiority and inherited virtue. The ability to live without working was presented as evidence of moral refinement, while the necessity of earning money was seen as degrading and socially disqualifying. The marriage market that provides the central dramatic tension in Austen's novels was actually a sophisticated economic system where young women were traded like commodities based on their dowries, family connections, and potential for producing male heirs. The romantic language used to describe these transactions concealed their fundamentally commercial nature, while making economic calculation appear to be emotional attachment. The entailment system that features prominently in Pride and Prejudice and other novels was designed to preserve family estates by passing property to male heirs regardless of their personal qualities or relationships to previous owners. This system prioritized property preservation over family welfare, while ensuring that women remained economically dependent throughout their lives. The limited career options available to educated men in Austen society, primarily the church, the military, and the law, were all controlled by networks of family influence and social connection rather than merit or competence. These career paths provided income and status to younger sons of gentry families, while maintaining class boundaries that prevented social mobility for qualified individuals from lower classes. The colonial wealth that supported many characters in Austen's novels came from plantation slavery in the West Indies, a source of income that characters prefer not to discuss in detail, despite its crucial importance to their lifestyle. This colonial exploitation enabled the leisure and refinement that characters consider marks of civilization, while depending on brutal oppression of enslaved people thousands of miles away. The agricultural economy that provided the foundation for landed wealth depended on tenant farmers who worked land they could never own, while paying rents that supported their landlords' elegant lifestyles. The social distance between landowners and agricultural workers was so great that they rarely interacted directly, allowing landlords to enjoy their income, without confronting the human costs of their privilege. The domestic service that made gentry lifestyle possible required armies of servants who worked long hours for minimal wages while being treated as invisible extensions of the households they served. The elaborate etiquette that governed gentry behaviour included rules that rendered servants socially non-existent except when their labour was needed. The legal system that protected property rights and maintained social order was designed and operated by the same class that benefited most from existing arrangements, ensuring that laws would preserve privilege rather than promote justice or equality. The administration of justice reflected economic and social hierarchies that made equal treatment impossible, regardless of legal theory. Women's legal status in Austen society was so restricted that they could not own property sign contracts or exercise any form of economic autonomy once they married, making marriage both an economic necessity and a form of legal death that eliminated their independent existence. Single women had slightly more legal rights, but faced social and economic pressures that made independence nearly impossible to maintain. The education system available to women in Austen's time was designed to make them attractive to potential husbands, rather than to develop their intellectual capabilities or prepare them for economic independence. Accomplishments like music drawing and speaking French were valued because they demonstrated leisure and refinement, rather than because they provided useful skills or knowledge. The cult of sensibility that influenced women's education emphasized emotional responsiveness and moral delicacy, while discouraging analytical thinking or practical knowledge that might make women less dependent on male protection. This educational philosophy created learned helplessness while presenting it as feminine virtue and moral refinement. The double standard that governed sexual behavior allowed men considerable freedom while demanding absolute purity from women, creating asymmetrical power relationships that gave men control over women's reputations and social standing. A single sexual indiscretion could destroy a woman's prospects for marriage while having minimal impact on a man's social position. The economic dependence that marriage created for women made divorce practically impossible and left wives vulnerable to abuse, neglect, or abandonment with no legal recourse or means of self-support. The romantic ideology that surrounded marriage concealed its function as an economic arrangement that transferred women from fathers to husbands like property changing ownership. In Pride and Prejudice, Austen's critique of social snobbery and economic inequality operates through the contrast between characters who judge others by their wealth and social position versus those who value personal qualities like intelligence, kindness, and moral integrity. The novel demonstrates how economic prejudice corrupts moral judgment, while showing that true worth has little connection to social status. Elizabeth Bennet's rejection of Mr. Collins's marriage proposal represents a rejection of the economic logic that governed most marriages in Austen society, as she chooses potential poverty over security with a man she cannot respect. This choice was radical for its time because it prioritized personal autonomy over economic security in ways that challenged basic assumptions about women's roles and motivations. The character of Lady Catherine de Bourgh embodies the arrogance and moral blindness that Austen associated with inherited privilege, as her wealth and social position have convinced her that she has the right to control other people's lives regardless of her obvious intellectual and moral limitations. Her interference in Elizabeth's relationship with Darcy demonstrates how social privilege corrupts judgment while creating delusions of superiority. Mr. Darcy's initial pride represents the casual contempt that wealthy people often display toward their social inferiors, while his eventual recognition of Elizabeth's worth demonstrates the possibility of moral growth when privilege is tempered by genuine self-reflection. His transformation suggests that social position need not determine personal character if individuals are willing to examine their prejudices honestly. The contrast between Jane Bennet's patient acceptance of social conventions and Elizabeth's willingness to challenge expectations reflects different strategies for navigating a society that offered women few good options. Jane's approach minimizes conflict, but accepts limitation, while Elizabeth's assertiveness creates risks, but preserves personal integrity and the possibility of genuine happiness. The economic pressures faced by the Bennet family due to the entailment of their estate illustrate how legal systems designed to preserve family wealth could actually threaten family welfare when circumstances changed. The novel shows how property laws that seemed reasonable in theory could create devastating practical consequences for women and children. The military officers who provide romantic interest and social disruption in the novel represent both the glamour and the danger of men whose profession required them to risk their lives, while offering few opportunities for long-term economic security. The militia's presence in the neighborhood creates excitement, but also reveals the underlying violence that supported the social order. In Emma Austen explores the moral corruption that can result from excessive privilege and insufficient responsibility, as the title character's wealth and social position enable her to interfere in others' lives while remaining largely insulated from the consequences of her actions. The novel demonstrates how privilege without accountability corrupts moral development while creating delusions of superiority. Emma Woodhouse's manipulation of Harriet Smith reveals how class differences create power imbalances that can be exploited by those with social advantages, as Emma uses her superior education and social position to influence someone who lacks the knowledge and confidence to resist her guidance. This relationship illustrates how inequality corrupts relationships while creating opportunities for abuse. The character of Miss Bates represents the precarious social position of educated women without independent means, as her genteel background provides her with refined manners but no economic security. Her decline from respected teacher to dependent relative demonstrates how quickly social position could change when economic support disappeared. Mr. Knightley's role as the voice of moral authority in the novel is complicated by his position as the largest landowner in the neighborhood, which gives him economic power over many of the other characters, while making his moral judgments potentially self-serving. Austen's portrayal suggests that moral authority should be based on character rather than economic position, but she also shows how difficult it is to separate the two in practice. The Box Hill episode where Emma humiliates Miss Bates represents a moral crisis that reveals how privilege can corrupt empathy and moral judgment, as Emma's social position has protected her from understanding the vulnerability of those with less security. Her eventual recognition of her cruelty demonstrates the possibility of moral growth, but also shows how much damage can be done before such recognition occurs. The romantic resolution of the novel, where Emma marries the much older and wealthier Mr. Knightley, can be read as either a conventional happy ending or a critique of how economic inequality shapes even the most personal relationships. The age and wealth differences between the characters suggest that their marriage may replicate rather than challenge existing power structures. In Mansfield Park, Austen's most politically complex novel, the critique of English society extends to its colonial foundations and the moral contradictions created by wealth derived from slavery. The novel's exploration of these themes is so subtle that readers have debated its political implications for over 2 centuries. Fanny Price's position as a poor relation dependent on the charity of her wealthy relatives illustrates the precarious situation of people caught between social classes who must navigate complex expectations while lacking the security of either working-class community or upper-class privilege. Her moral development occurs despite rather than because of her social position. The Bertram family's wealth derives from Sir Thomas's plantation in Antigua, a source of income that enables their elegant lifestyle while depending on the brutal exploitation of enslaved people. The novel's few direct references to slavery are brief and euphemistic, but they frame the entire story by revealing the foundation of the family's social position. The theatrical episode that dominates the middle of the novel represents a break in normal social constraints that reveals characters' true natures while challenging the boundaries that maintain social order. The controversial play Lover's Vows deals with themes of illegitimacy and social inequality that were considered inappropriate for public discussion, making its performance a form of social rebellion. Mary Crawford's wit and intelligence make her an attractive character, but her moral flexibility and willingness to accept wealth regardless of its source represent the ethical compromises that Austen associated with fashionable society. Her eventual rejection by Edmund demonstrates that moral integrity requires more than social accomplishment or personal charm. The contrast between Portsmouth, where Fanny's birth family lives in crowded, chaotic conditions, and Mansfield Park's elegant tranquility illustrates how differently the same society treats people based on their economic position. Fanny's discomfort in both environments suggests that she belongs fully to neither class despite her blood connections to both. In Sense and Sensibility, Austen examines different approaches to dealing with economic insecurity and social disadvantage, contrasting Eleanor's rational acceptance of limitations with Marianne's romantic rebellion against social constraints. The novel demonstrates how economic pressures affect even the most personal decisions, while showing that different personality types require different survival strategies. The Dashwood family's loss of income due to inheritance laws that favour male heirs illustrates how legal systems that seemed reasonable in principle could create devastating practical consequences for women and children when family circumstances changed. Their reduced income forces them to navigate a social world where they no longer belong to their original class, but haven't yet found a secure new position. Willoughby's abandonment of Marianne in favour of a wealthy wife demonstrates how economic pressures could corrupt personal relationships while forcing individuals to choose between love and financial security. His eventual confession reveals that he regrets his choice, but felt he had no alternative given his debts and expensive lifestyle. Edward Ferrars's secret engagement to Lucy Steele illustrates how youthful indiscretions could create lasting obligations that prevented individuals from making choices based on their mature judgment. The novel shows how social conventions that seemed designed to protect people could actually trap them in situations that prevented happiness and personal growth. The resolution of the novel, where both sisters marry men who can provide economic security as well as emotional satisfaction, might seem conventionally happy, but it also demonstrates how limited women's options were and how much their happiness depended on finding men who combined personal virtue with economic advantage. Austen's critique of religious hypocrisy appears throughout her novels in the form of clergy who are more concerned with their income and social position than with their spiritual duties. Characters like Mr. Collins in Pride and Prejudice and Mr. Elton in Emma represent religious figures who have transformed their calling into a career advancement strategy rather than a form of service. The Church of England's role as a career path for younger sons of gentry families meant that many clergy entered the profession for economic rather than spiritual reasons, creating a religious establishment more concerned with maintaining social hierarchies than with promoting Christian values. Austen's portrayal of these clerical characters reveals the moral emptiness that resulted from this system. The contrast between genuine religious feeling and institutional religiosity appears in characters like Fanny Price, whose moral development occurs through personal reflection rather than formal religious instruction. Austen suggests that true spiritual growth requires individual integrity rather than conformity to religious authority. The tithe system that provided income for parish clergy was essentially a tax on agricultural production that supported religious figures, whether or not they provided useful service to their communities. This system created economic incentives that encouraged religious conformity while potentially corrupting spiritual authenticity. Austen's treatment of education reveals how the system was designed to maintain class distinctions rather than to develop human potential or promote social mobility. The education available to different characters varies dramatically based on their economic position, with wealthy children receiving cultural accomplishments while poor children receive minimal practical training. The governesses who appear in several novels represent educated women trapped between social classes, possessing the cultural knowledge valued by the upper class, but lacking the economic security necessary for independence. Their precarious position illustrates how the education system created vulnerabilities while promising advancement. The boarding schools that educated upper-class young women emphasized accomplishments like music and drawing that would make them attractive to potential husbands rather than developing intellectual capabilities that might enable economic independence. This educational philosophy created ornamental rather than functional knowledge while maintaining gender hierarchies. The informal education that occurs through reading and conversation in Austen's novels often proves more valuable than formal schooling, as characters like Elizabeth Bennet and Emma Woodhouse develop their intelligence through independent study and social interaction rather than through institutional instruction. This contrast suggests that true education requires intellectual curiosity and critical thinking that formal systems often discourage. The seasonal social calendar that structures upper-class life in Austen's novels creates artificial cycles of activity that bear little relationship to productive work or natural rhythms, demonstrating how leisure-class existence becomes disconnected from the economic realities that support it. The round of visits, assemblies, and house parties that occupies characters' time serves primarily to maintain social networks and arrange marriages, rather than to accomplish anything of lasting value. London seasons that bring together wealthy families from across England create temporary communities focused on display and competition rather than genuine social connection, as families compete to demonstrate their wealth and status while seeking advantageous marriages for their children. These gatherings reveal the performative nature of upper-class social life, while showing how economic relationships masquerade as social ones. Country house visits that feature prominently in novels like Persuasion and Northanger Abbey create opportunities for character development and romantic attachment, but they also demonstrate how social obligations maintain networks of mutual dependence among wealthy families. The elaborate hospitality expected at these events requires enormous resources, while serving primarily to reinforce social hierarchies. The assembly ball culture that provides romantic opportunities for characters also serves as a marketplace where young people display themselves for potential marriage partners while their families evaluate economic and social advantages. The formal dancing that structures these events creates opportunities for interaction within carefully controlled social frameworks that maintain class boundaries. The morning visits and calling card systems that govern social interaction create elaborate protocols for maintaining relationships while avoiding intimacy that might challenge social boundaries. These social rituals demonstrate how upper-class society manages human interaction to preserve existing power structures while creating illusions of personal choice and social freedom. Austen's portrayal of the legal profession reveals how the justice system serves the interests of property owners while providing career opportunities for ambitious young men willing to work within existing power structures. Lawyers in her novels are typically more concerned with protecting their clients' economic interests than with promoting justice or protecting the vulnerable. The marriage settlements and inheritance law that feature in several novels demonstrate how legal systems were designed to preserve family wealth rather than to protect individual rights or promote fairness. These legal mechanisms could create situations where children were disinherited, women were left without support, and families were destroyed by property disputes. The magistrate system that administered local justice was controlled by the same landowners who benefited from existing social arrangements, ensuring that law enforcement would protect property rights and maintain social order rather than challenge inequality or abuse. This system made reform difficult while legitimizing existing power structures through legal authority. Austen's treatment of trade and commerce reveals the complex relationship between old money derived from land ownership and new money created through commercial activity. Characters associated with trade are often portrayed sympathetically, but they face social prejudice from those whose wealth has older and seemingly more respectable origins. The colonial commerce that provided wealth for families like the Bertrams in Mansfield Park involved not just plantation slavery, but complex trading networks that connected English consumption to global exploitation. The luxuries that marked refined living, sugar, tea, silk, spices, came from systems of forced labour that polite society preferred not to examine closely. The naval careers that feature prominently in Persuasion and other novels provided opportunities for social advancement through professional achievement, but they also involved defending British commercial interests through military force that maintained global trading networks built on inequality and exploitation. The banking and investment systems that supported landed wealth were beginning to create new forms of economic power that would eventually challenge traditional aristocratic dominance. Characters like Mr. Gardner in Pride and Prejudice represent emerging middle-class prosperity that derived from productive economic activity rather than inherited privilege. Austen's subtle critique of gender roles operates through characters who exceed conventional expectations while remaining within socially acceptable boundaries, demonstrating both the possibilities and limitations that intelligent women faced in her society. Her heroines achieve limited forms of autonomy while working within systems that fundamentally restrict their options. The intellectual equality that develops between Austen's romantic couples suggests possibilities for marriage based on mutual respect rather than economic convenience, but these relationships remain exceptional rather than typical. The novels show that such partnerships require unusual circumstances and exceptional individuals willing to challenge social conventions. The female friendships portrayed in Austen's novels often provide more honest emotional support than romantic relationships, as women share experiences and perspectives that help them navigate social challenges while maintaining their integrity. These friendships demonstrate possibilities for female solidarity, despite competitive pressures created by the marriage market. The domestic management skills that characters like Eleanor Dashwood and Anne Elliot display represent forms of practical intelligence that were undervalued by a society that preferred ornamental accomplishments to useful capabilities. Austen's appreciation for these skills suggests alternative ways of measuring worth that challenge conventional social values. The economic analysis that underlies Austen's social critique becomes most explicit in her treatment of inheritance debt and financial planning, revealing how individual character is shaped by economic pressures while showing that moral worth has little correlation with financial success. The debt crises that threaten families like the Bennets and the Dashwoods illustrate how economic vulnerability could force moral compromises while destroying social position almost overnight. These financial pressures create the dramatic tension in Austen's novels, while revealing the insecurity that lurked beneath surface prosperity. The contrast between earned and unearned income appears throughout Austen's work as she distinguishes between wealth derived from productive activity and wealth extracted from others' labour. Characters who work for their money are often portrayed more sympathetically than those who live on inherited income or investment returns. The marriage portion negotiations that occur behind the romantic scenes in Austen's novels reveal the commercial calculations that determined most marriages, while showing how economic arrangements were disguised as emotional attachments. These negotiations demonstrate how human relationships were commodified within systems that claimed to value personal virtue. Austen's narrative technique creates complicity between readers and the social system she critiques, as we enjoy the elegant lifestyle and refined conversation that depend on exploitation, while sharing her characters' moral blindness about their economic foundations. This complicity forces readers to examine their own assumptions about wealth privilege and social responsibility. The free, indirect discourse that characterizes Austen's mature style allows readers to experience events from characters' perspectives while maintaining authorial distance that enables ironic commentary. This technique reveals the gap between characters' self-perception and social reality, while allowing readers to develop their own critical understanding. The restricted narrative focus that limits readers' knowledge to what upper-class characters observe means that the working people who support their lifestyle remain largely invisible, just as they were invisible to the characters themselves. This limitation forces readers to recognize how class position shapes perception, while highlighting the people whose labor made elegant leisure possible. The domestic realism that grounds Austen's social criticism in carefully observed details of daily life demonstrates how political and economic structures operate through personal relationships and individual choices. Her focus on private life reveals the public dimensions of supposedly personal decisions while showing how social systems shape individual consciousness. The comedic resolution of Austen's novels often reinforces the same social structures that her analysis has revealed to be problematic, creating tension between critical insight and conventional satisfaction that reflects the limited options available to individuals operating within existing systems. These endings suggest both the possibility of personal happiness and the persistence of structural inequality. The enduring appeal of Austen's novels lies partly in their ability to provide both escapist pleasure and critical insight, allowing readers to enjoy elegant lifestyles while understanding their moral and economic costs. This double consciousness reflects Austen's own position as someone who benefited from the system she critiqued, while lacking the power to change it fundamentally. Modern readers who appreciate Austen's social criticism while enjoying her romantic plots face similar contradictions as we recognize the injustices she exposes, while often sharing her character's desire for security status and individual happiness. Her novels continue to reveal how personal choices are shaped by economic structures, while challenging us to examine our own assumptions about wealth inequality and social responsibility. The feminist readings of Austen that emerged in the 20th century have highlighted her analysis of women's economic dependence, while sometimes overlooking her broader critique of capitalism and class privilege. Her concern with gender inequality was inseparable from her understanding of how economic systems create multiple forms of injustice and exploitation. The post-colonial criticism that has re-examined Austen's work in recent decades has revealed how thoroughly her domestic world was connected to global systems of exploitation, demonstrating that the elegant drawing rooms of her novels were furnished with the profits of slavery and imperial exploitation. This criticism has deepened appreciation for the political dimensions of her social analysis. Understanding Austen's hidden social commentary helps contemporary readers appreciate both her artistic achievement and her moral courage in exposing the contradictions of a society that claimed moral superiority while practicing systematic exploitation. Her novels remain relevant because the economic and social systems she critiqued continue to influence contemporary life in ways that make her insights valuable for understanding persistent inequalities and moral challenges. Standing today in the landscapes that inspired Austen's novels, visitors can appreciate both the beauty that attracted her aesthetic sense and the economic relationships that supported the elegant lifestyle she portrayed. The grand houses, landscaped gardens, and picturesque villages that define Austen country represent remarkable artistic and cultural achievements built on foundations that she understood to be morally problematic. Her legacy reminds us that critical intelligence and artistic achievement can coexist with enjoyment of beauty and pleasure in human relationships, but that such enjoyment carries moral responsibilities to understand and address the systems that make it possible. Jane Austen's hidden social commentary continues to challenge readers to look beyond surface appearances while appreciating the human complexities that make simple moral judgments impossible and social change both necessary and difficult. In the arid landscapes of ancient Persia, where water was more precious than gold and green spaces represented miraculous victories over hostile nature, Persian rulers created gardens that were far more than mere landscaping projects. These were earthly paradises designed to demonstrate divine power over the elements, while expressing philosophical and spiritual visions that influenced garden design across multiple civilizations for over 2 millennia. You might think of gardens as pleasant recreational spaces or aesthetic additions to architecture, but Persian gardens were sophisticated expressions of imperial power, religious cosmology, and humanity's relationship with the natural world. They represented attempts to create perfect microcosms of paradise on earth while demonstrating the ruler's godlike ability to transform barren desert into flourishing oases through the application of wealth engineering skill and absolute authority. These weren't simply beautiful spaces, but complex symbolic systems that encoded political messages, religious beliefs, and cultural values in their physical design. Every element, from the geometric layout to the selection of plants, from the engineering of water systems to the placement of pavilions, served multiple functions that ranged from practical cooling and food production to spiritual contemplation and political intimidation. Welcome to the world of Persian garden paradises, where humanity's most sophisticated attempts to control nature served purposes that extended far beyond beauty or comfort to encompass political power, spiritual expression, and cultural identity that continue to influence garden design throughout the Islamic world and beyond. The Persian concept of paradise derived from the Old Persian word paradisa, meaning walled enclosure, established the fundamental principle that earthly paradise required the creation of protected spaces where natural abundance could flourish despite hostile external conditions. This concept influenced not just garden design, but religious and philosophical understanding of the relationship between human effort and divine blessing. The Achaemenid rulers who created the first great Persian gardens understood these spaces as demonstrations of imperial power that could transform hostile landscapes through the application of wealth engineering skill and administrative organization. The ability to create green oases in arid regions served as powerful symbols of royal authority, while providing practical benefits including food production, climate control, and recreational space. The four-part design that became characteristic of Persian gardens, known as the Chahar Bagh, or Four Gardens, divided enclosed spaces into quadrants separated by water channels that represented the four rivers of paradise described in religious texts. This geometric organization imposed rational order on natural chaos, while creating microclimates that enabled diverse plant communities to thrive in carefully controlled environments. The central water features that dominated Persian garden design served multiple practical and symbolic functions, providing irrigation for plants, cooling for buildings, and spiritual significance as sources of life and purity. The engineering required to bring water to garden sites often involved complex systems of underground channels, wells, and pumps that represented major technological achievements. The Qanat system that supplied water to many Persian gardens involved underground channels that could transport water across vast distances from mountain sources to desert destinations without significant loss to evaporation. These engineering marvels required sophisticated understanding of geology, hydrology, and construction techniques that enabled garden creation in seemingly impossible locations. The architectural elements integrated into Persian gardens included pavilions, reflecting pools, and geometric pathways that created frameworks for human interaction with carefully designed natural spaces. These structures served practical functions including shade and shelter, while providing vantage points for appreciating garden beauty and symbolic meaning. The plant selection in Persian gardens combined practical considerations, including food production and climate adaptation, with aesthetic and symbolic choices that reflected cultural values and spiritual beliefs. The gardens typically included fruit trees, flowering plants, and aromatic herbs that provided sensory pleasure, while demonstrating the garden maker's ability to nurture life in harsh conditions. The seasonal cycles that governed Persian garden design created spaces that changed throughout the year, providing different experiences and symbolic meanings as plants flowered, fruited, and went dormant according to natural rhythms. This temporal dimension added complexity to garden design, while connecting human-made spaces to cosmic cycles that were central to Persian religious and philosophical thought. The maintenance requirements of Persian gardens involved armies of skilled gardeners who possessed specialized knowledge about plant care, water management, and seasonal maintenance that kept these complex ecosystems functioning effectively. The labor needed to maintain garden paradise was enormous and required sophisticated management systems that reflected the garden's importance to their royal owners. The social functions served by Persian gardens extended beyond private royal pleasure to include public ceremonies, diplomatic receptions, and cultural activities that demonstrated imperial magnificence while providing settings for the exercise of political power. These spaces served as outdoor courts where rulers could display their wealth and cultural sophistication to visitors from throughout the known world. The influence of Persian garden design spread throughout the Islamic world as conquering armies carried knowledge of garden-making techniques to new regions, while adapting basic principles to different climates, cultures, and political systems. The four-part garden layout and emphasis on water features became standard elements in Islamic garden design from Spain to India. The Sassanid period saw the development of increasingly sophisticated garden designs that incorporated advanced engineering techniques while elaborating the symbolic and aesthetic elements that made Persian gardens famous throughout the ancient world. These gardens served as models for later Islamic garden design, while demonstrating the technical and artistic capabilities of Persian civilization. The philosophical foundations of Persian garden design drew on Zoroastrian beliefs about the cosmic struggle between order and chaos, light and darkness, fertility and barrenness. Gardens represented victories of order over chaos, while demonstrating human capacity to create beauty and abundance through cooperation with divine forces rather than opposition to natural processes. The geometric principles that governed Persian garden layout reflected mathematical understanding that connected earthly design to cosmic harmony, with proportional relationships between different garden elements expressing beliefs about divine order and human participation in universal patterns. These mathematical foundations linked garden design to astronomical observation and religious cosmology. The symbolic meanings encoded in Persian garden design operated on multiple levels, from political messages about royal power to religious teachings about paradise and spiritual development. Visitors could read these gardens as texts that communicated complex ideas about authority, spirituality, and the proper relationship between humanity and nature. The horticultural achievements represented by Persian gardens included the development of new plant varieties, innovative growing techniques, and sophisticated understanding of plant ecology that enabled successful cultivation of diverse species in challenging climates. These agricultural innovations contributed to food security while advancing scientific understanding of plant biology. The technological innovations required for Persian garden construction included advances in hydraulic engineering construction techniques and materials science that had applications beyond garden design. The knowledge developed for garden construction contributed to urban planning, agricultural development, and architectural achievement throughout Persian civilization. During the Islamic period, Persian garden design principles were refined and elaborated through the integration of Islamic theological concepts with traditional Persian aesthetic and engineering practices. The gardens created during this period achieved new levels of sophistication while maintaining continuity with earlier design traditions. The Abbasid caliphs who ruled from Baghdad incorporated Persian garden design into their imperial capital, creating spaces that demonstrated their cultural sophistication while providing practical benefits including food production and climate control. These Baghdad gardens became models for garden design throughout the Islamic world while preserving and transmitting Persian design principles. The Moorish gardens of Al-Andalus adapted Persian design principles to the Mediterranean climate of southern Spain, creating new variations on traditional themes while demonstrating the adaptability of Persian garden concepts to different environmental and cultural conditions. Gardens like those at the Alhambra showed how Persian principles could be modified without losing their essential character. The Mughal gardens of India represented perhaps the most spectacular adaptation of Persian garden design to new cultural and environmental contexts, as rulers like Akbar and Shah Jahan created gardens that combined Persian geometric principles with Indian plant species and architectural traditions. The Taj Mahal complex exemplifies this synthesis of Persian design concepts with local materials and cultural values. The technological achievements of Mughal garden construction included innovations in water delivery systems, fountain design, and architectural integration that advanced the engineering capabilities inherited from Persian precedents. These gardens demonstrated how traditional design principles could be enhanced through new technologies and materials. The cultural functions served by Mughal gardens extended the Persian tradition of using gardens as settings for political and cultural activities while adapting these functions to Indian court culture and social customs. The gardens became settings for poetry recitation, musical performance, and philosophical discussion that enriched Mughal cultural life. The Safavid revival of Persian garden design during the 16th and 17th centuries created new masterpieces, including the gardens of Isfahan, that demonstrated renewed interest in traditional Persian aesthetic principles, while incorporating new plant species and design elements acquired through expanded trade networks and cultural exchange. The Shah Abbas garden projects in Isfahan represented massive investments in urban beautification and agricultural development that served both practical and symbolic functions. These gardens provided food and recreational space while demonstrating the Shah's power and cultural sophistication to both domestic and foreign audiences. The role of poetry and literature in Persian garden culture created rich traditions of garden-inspired writing that celebrated both the physical beauty of these spaces and their spiritual significance. Persian poets like Hafez and Ferdowsi used garden imagery to explore themes of love, spirituality, and the relationship between earthly and divine beauty. The musical traditions associated with Persian gardens included outdoor performances and compositions inspired by garden settings that enhanced the sensory experience of these spaces while creating cultural associations between natural beauty and artistic achievement. Garden pavilions were designed to provide acoustic settings for musical performance. The philosophical traditions that developed around Persian gardens included schools of thought that used garden metaphors to explore questions about knowledge, spirituality, and the proper relationship between humanity and nature. Gardens became settings for philosophical discussion while providing imagery for abstract thought about cosmic order and human purpose. The astronomical observations conducted in Persian gardens reflected the connection between garden design and cosmic understanding, as rulers and scholars used garden spaces for studying celestial movements while incorporating astronomical principles into garden layout and architectural orientation. The decline of traditional Persian garden culture during periods of political instability and foreign invasion led to the loss of much specialized knowledge about garden construction and maintenance, though basic design principles persisted in simplified forms that could be maintained with reduced resources and expertise. The colonial period brought European garden design principles to regions where Persian-influenced gardens had previously dominated, creating hybrid forms that combined European and Islamic design elements while often losing the sophisticated water management and symbolic complexity that had characterized traditional gardens. The modern revival of interest in Persian garden design has led to restoration projects, new construction based on traditional principles and scholarly research that has recovered much of the technical and cultural knowledge that had been lost during periods of decline and foreign influence. The UNESCO World Heritage designation of several Persian gardens has recognized their global cultural significance while providing resources for preservation and study that help maintain these important examples of human achievement in landscape design and environmental management. The contemporary influence of Persian garden design can be seen in modern landscape architecture, urban planning, and environmental design that incorporates principles of geometric organization, water management, and symbolic meaning derived from Persian precedents. These influences demonstrate the continuing relevance of Persian design concepts for addressing contemporary challenges. The environmental lessons embedded in Persian garden design include sophisticated understanding of water conservation, microclimate creation, and sustainable agriculture that remain relevant for addressing contemporary challenges, including climate change, water scarcity, and urban environmental management. The cultural synthesis achieved in Persian gardens demonstrates how design traditions can successfully adapt to new environmental and cultural contexts while maintaining their essential character and symbolic meaning. This adaptability has enabled Persian garden principles to influence garden design across diverse cultures and climates. The restoration challenges faced by historic Persian gardens include balancing authenticity with practical necessity while addressing problems including water scarcity, urban development pressure, and loss of traditional maintenance knowledge. These challenges require careful research and innovative solutions that respect historical precedents while addressing contemporary realities. The educational value of Persian gardens lies not just in their artistic and technical achievements, but in their demonstration of how human societies can create sustainable relationships with challenging natural environments through careful planning, technological innovation, and cultural investment in long-term projects. Understanding Persian garden paradises helps contemporary people appreciate both the remarkable achievements possible through sophisticated design and engineering, and the cultural values that motivated societies to invest enormous resources in creating beautiful spaces that served multiple functions, including politics, spirituality, agriculture, and human pleasure. The legacy of Persian garden design extends far beyond its influence on landscape architecture to encompass broader lessons about the relationship between human ambition and natural limitation, the integration of practical and aesthetic considerations in design, and the role of cultural investment in creating spaces that enhance human life while demonstrating respect for natural processes. Standing today in restored Persian gardens or their international derivatives, visitors can appreciate both the beauty achieved through careful design and the sophisticated understanding of environmental management that made these achievements possible. These gardens remind us that human creativity can work with, rather than against, natural processes to create spaces that are both beautiful and sustainable. The Persian garden tradition demonstrates that landscape design can serve purposes that extend far beyond recreation or aesthetics to encompass political communication, spiritual expression, and environmental stewardship that create lasting value for multiple generations. These gardens show how human societies can create positive legacies through projects that require patience, skill, and commitment to values that transcend immediate practical necessity. In the towns and cities of medieval Europe, entire communities devoted generations to building monuments that most workers would never see completed, creating architectural achievements so ambitious that they required faith, skill, and sacrifice on a scale that challenges modern understanding of what motivates human achievement when rewards remain decades or centuries in the future. Cathedral construction represented one of humanity's most extraordinary collective enterprises, bringing together thousands of people in projects that could span 2 or 3 centuries while consuming enormous resources and requiring technical innovations that pushed medieval engineering to its absolute limits. These weren't just religious buildings, but expressions of community identity, economic investment, and spiritual aspiration that transformed entire societies through the process of their creation. You might assume that medieval people were simpler than modern individuals, motivated by uncomplicated faith and willing to accept whatever their religious leaders demanded. But cathedral construction reveals sophisticated communities that made complex calculations about resource allocation, technological innovation, and long-term planning, while balancing competing interests including religious devotion, civic pride, economic development, and political ambition. Welcome to the world of medieval cathedral building, where entire communities committed themselves to projects that would outlast their great-grandchildren, where master craftsmen developed technologies that wouldn't be equaled for centuries, and where the desire to reach toward heaven required mastering the most challenging problems of earthly engineering and organization. Medieval cathedral construction began not with architectural plans, but with community decisions that represented enormous leaps of faith as towns and cities committed to projects that would require resources, skills, and organizational capabilities that often exceeded their current capacity by vast margins. These decisions reflected optimism about future prosperity and divine assistance that enabled communities to attempt achievements that seemed impossible by any rational calculation. The initial planning for cathedral construction involved complex negotiations between religious authorities, civic leaders, wealthy donors, and craft guilds who had to coordinate their various interests while committing to projects that would require sustained cooperation across multiple generations. These planning processes often took years and involved elaborate legal agreements that bound communities to long-term obligations. The site selection for medieval cathedrals required careful consideration of practical factors, including foundation conditions, water supply, transportation access, and available building materials, while also addressing symbolic considerations including religious significance, civic prominence, and relationships to existing urban development. These decisions often determined the feasibility and ultimate success of construction projects. The financial planning required for cathedral construction involved unprecedented experiments in long-term resource mobilization, as communities developed innovative funding mechanisms, including special taxes, donation drives, fundraising campaigns, and commercial enterprises designed to generate revenue over periods that could extend for centuries. The architectural design process for medieval cathedrals evolved during construction as builders learned from experience while adapting to changing circumstances, including resource availability, technological development, and community needs. These buildings grew organically, rather than following predetermined plans, with each generation of builders contributing to evolving designs. The technological challenges posed by cathedral construction drove innovations in engineering materials, science and construction techniques that advanced medieval technical knowledge, while creating capabilities that enabled increasingly ambitious architectural projects. The solutions developed for cathedral construction influenced secular building projects and contributed to broader technological development. The engineering challenges that cathedral builders faced included supporting enormous stone structures that reached unprecedented heights while creating interior spaces of remarkable size and complexity. The solutions they developed, including flying buttresses, pointed arches, and ribbed vaulting, represented major advances in structural engineering that enabled Gothic architecture to achieve its characteristic soaring verticality. The flying buttress system that became characteristic of Gothic cathedral construction solved fundamental problems in structural engineering by transferring the lateral forces generated by high stone vaults to external supports that could resist these forces without interfering with interior space. This innovation enabled the creation of vast interior volumes with minimal interior structural supports. The pointed arch technology that defined Gothic architectural style provided structural advantages over Roman semicircular arches by distributing loads more efficiently while enabling greater height and spanning capability. The adoption of pointed arches revolutionized medieval construction while creating the distinctive aesthetic that characterized Gothic cathedrals. The ribbed vaulting systems developed for cathedral construction enabled the creation of complex ceiling structures that could span large spaces while supporting enormous weights. These vaulting techniques required sophisticated understanding of structural forces and precise craftsmanship that pushed medieval building skills to their limits. The foundation engineering required for cathedral construction involved excavating and preparing building sites that could support structures weighing hundreds of thousands of tons while providing stable bases for towers that reached heights of 400 feet or more. These foundation systems often required innovative techniques for dealing with challenging soil conditions and groundwater problems. The materials procurement for cathedral construction created supply networks that could span entire regions while requiring quality control systems that ensured building materials met the demanding specifications required for large-scale stone construction. The transportation of materials to construction sites often required infrastructure improvements, including roads, bridges, and harbours. The stone quarrying operations that supplied cathedral construction involved identifying and extracting high-quality building stone from quarries that might be located hundreds of miles from construction sites. The selection of appropriate stone types required expertise in geology and materials science that influenced both structural performance and aesthetic outcomes. The timber procurement for cathedral construction required access to enormous quantities of high-quality wood for scaffolding, construction equipment, roof structures, and interior features. The forests that supplied cathedral timber were often managed as long-term resources dedicated to construction projects that could require wood supplies for decades. The metalworking required for cathedral construction included the production of specialized tools, hardware, and decorative elements that demanded advanced skills in ferrous and non-ferrous metal fabrication. The iron clamps-led roofing and bronze doors created for cathedrals required metalworking capabilities that represented the most advanced technology of their time. The workforce organization required for cathedral construction involved coordinating hundreds or thousands of workers with different skills, training levels, and responsibilities, while maintaining productivity and quality standards across construction periods that could extend for generations. This coordination required management innovations that influenced medieval guild organization and labor relations. The master mason who directed cathedral construction served as architect, engineer, and project manager, while possessing technical knowledge that combined practical building experience with theoretical understanding of structural forces and design principles. These master craftsmen occupied social positions that reflected both their technical expertise and their crucial role in community projects. The apprenticeship systems that trained cathedral workers created educational institutions that transmitted technical knowledge while developing the skilled workforce required for complex construction projects. These training programs produced craftsmen whose capabilities enabled increasingly ambitious architectural projects while preserving and advancing construction techniques. The guild organizations that supplied cathedral workers provided quality control pricing standards and labor organization that ensured construction projects could access skilled craftsmen while maintaining professional standards that protected both workers and employers. These guilds influenced urban economic development while supporting major construction projects. The seasonal rhythms that governed cathedral construction reflected the practical limitations of medieval building technology, as work slowed or stopped during winter months when weather conditions made outdoor construction dangerous or impossible. These seasonal patterns influenced construction scheduling while creating annual cycles of intense activity, alternating with periods of preparation and planning. The religious motivation that inspired cathedral construction provided powerful incentives for community participation, while creating shared purposes that enabled sustained cooperation across social and economic boundaries. The belief that cathedral construction served divine purposes helped communities maintain commitment to projects that required enormous sacrifices with delayed or uncertain rewards. The pilgrimage economy that often developed around cathedral construction created revenue streams that helped fund building projects while providing economic benefits that justified community investment in religious architecture. The commercial activities associated with pilgrimage sites often transformed local economies while supporting construction efforts. The relic acquisition that accompanied cathedral construction involved obtaining sacred objects that would attract pilgrims while providing spiritual justification for enormous building projects. The competition for important relics influenced cathedral design while creating networks of religious and commercial exchange that supported construction efforts. The liturgical requirements that shaped cathedral design included the need for spaces that could accommodate complex religious ceremonies, while providing appropriate settings for the full range of religious activities, including daily worship, special festivals, and sacramental functions. These requirements influenced architectural decisions while creating buildings optimized for religious use. The community identity that developed around cathedral construction created social cohesion while providing shared purposes that transcended individual interests and class boundaries. The pride associated with cathedral projects influenced civic development while creating cultural legacies that persisted long after construction completion. The economic impact of cathedral construction extended far beyond the direct costs of building materials and labor to include infrastructure development, technological advancement, and commercial activity that transformed entire regions. Cathedral construction often served as economic development projects that created prosperity while building religious monuments. The urban development that accompanied cathedral construction included housing for workers, shops for specialized craftsmen, and infrastructure improvements that supported large construction projects, while creating permanent improvements to medieval cities. Cathedral construction often catalyzed broader urban development, while creating architectural focal points for community life. The technological transfer that resulted from cathedral construction spread construction innovations throughout medieval Europe, while creating networks of skilled craftsmen who carried advanced techniques to new locations. The master masons who worked on multiple cathedral projects served as conduits for technological exchange that advanced medieval building capabilities. The architectural influence of cathedral construction extended beyond religious buildings to influence secular architecture, including town halls, guild halls, and private residences that incorporated Gothic design elements and construction techniques. The innovations developed for cathedral construction influenced broader architectural development while creating distinctive regional building traditions. The artistic achievements associated with cathedral construction included sculpture, stained glass painting, and decorative arts that represented the highest levels of medieval artistic achievement while creating integrated artistic environments that combined multiple media in unified aesthetic experiences. These artistic programs required coordination between different craft traditions while creating some of history's most impressive artistic ensembles. The sculptural programs that decorated cathedral exteriors and interiors required armies of skilled stone carvers who created figurative and decorative works that combined religious instruction with artistic achievement. The sculptural decoration of Gothic cathedrals represented some of the finest artistic work of the medieval period while serving educational and devotional functions. The stained glass windows that filled cathedral interiors created luminous environments that transform natural light into spiritual experience, while demonstrating advanced techniques in glass production and artistic design. The stained glass workshops that served cathedral construction developed technologies and artistic capabilities that influenced glass production for centuries. The manuscript illumination and metalwork associated with cathedral construction included liturgical books, vestments, and ceremonial objects that complemented architectural achievement while demonstrating the full range of medieval artistic capabilities. These associated arts created complete artistic environments that enhanced the spiritual and aesthetic impact of cathedral architecture. The preservation challenges faced by medieval cathedrals include structural deterioration, environmental damage, and the need for ongoing maintenance that requires specialized knowledge and skills that may no longer be readily available. Modern conservation efforts attempt to preserve these architectural achievements while adapting to contemporary technical and financial realities. The restoration projects that maintain medieval cathedrals often require recreation of medieval construction techniques and materials while incorporating modern knowledge about structural engineering and material science. These restoration efforts demonstrate both the durability of medieval construction and the challenges of maintaining complex historical buildings. The continuing religious function of medieval cathedrals creates unique challenges for preservation and adaptation, as these buildings must serve contemporary religious needs while maintaining their historical integrity and architectural significance. Modern liturgical requirements sometimes conflict with historical preservation goals, while creating complex decisions about appropriate modifications. The tourism impact of medieval cathedrals creates both opportunities and challenges for preservation, as visitor revenue can support maintenance efforts, while visitor pressure can threaten the structural and aesthetic integrity of historic buildings. Managing tourism while preserving cathedral heritage requires careful planning and ongoing monitoring. The educational value of medieval cathedrals extends beyond their architectural and artistic achievement to include lessons about community organization, technological innovation, and long-term planning that remain relevant for contemporary societies facing complex challenges that require sustained collective effort. Understanding medieval cathedral construction helps modern people appreciate both the remarkable achievements possible through sustained community effort and the cultural values that motivated societies to invest enormous resources in projects that served purposes beyond immediate practical necessity. The legacy of medieval cathedral construction includes not just the buildings themselves, but the technological innovations, organizational methods, and cultural achievements that influenced European development for centuries while creating architectural monuments that continue to inspire awe and admiration. Standing today in the soaring interior spaces of Gothic cathedrals, visitors can appreciate both the technical skill and the spiritual aspiration that motivated medieval communities to attempt projects that pushed human capabilities to their limits while creating architectural achievements that remain unsurpassed in their combination of engineering innovation and aesthetic power. The cathedral builders remind us that human societies can achieve extraordinary things when they commit to projects that serve purposes larger than individual benefit, while demonstrating faith in future possibilities that may seem impossible given current limitations. Their legacy challenges us to consider what contemporary projects might deserve similar commitment, while inspiring us to attempt achievements that could benefit generations we will never see. History of textile production. From the moment early humans first twisted plant fibers together to create string, the production of textiles has driven more technological innovation, economic development, and social change than perhaps any other human activity. The fundamental need for clothing and the desire for decoration transformed hunting and gathering societies into agricultural civilizations, created the first global trade networks, and ultimately powered the Industrial Revolution that reshaped human civilization. You might think of textile production as a simple craft involving spinning and weaving. but the history of fabric creation reveals one of humanity's most complex technological achievements, requiring innovations in agriculture, chemistry, engineering, and manufacturing that influenced virtually every aspect of human development. The technologies developed for making cloth created the foundation for modern industrial society while generating wealth and suffering on unprecedented scales. The story of textile production is also the story of human ingenuity under pressure, as societies developed increasingly sophisticated methods for transforming raw materials into finished goods that could protect human bodies while expressing cultural identity, social status, and aesthetic values. Each breakthrough in textile technology enabled new forms of social organization while creating opportunities for both prosperity and exploitation. Welcome to the world of textile production, where the simple act of making cloth drove some of history's greatest innovations while revealing humanity's capacity for both remarkable creativity and systematic cruelty in pursuit of profit and competitive advantage. The earliest textile production emerged from humanity's need for protection against weather and the desire for decoration that distinguished cultural groups while expressing individual and collective identity. The development of textile skills required understanding plant and animal biology materials, science and mechanical engineering that pushed early societies toward increasingly sophisticated technological capabilities. The discovery of fiber preparation techniques, including the processing of plant materials like flax and cotton or animal products like wool and silk, required systematic experimentation and knowledge transmission that created some of humanity's first specialized technical skills. These fiber preparation methods involved complex processes that could take weeks or months, while requiring specialized tools and accumulated knowledge. The invention of spinning, which transformed loose fibers into continuous threads, strong enough for weaving, represented a crucial technological breakthrough that enabled the production of flexible fabrics suitable for clothing and other applications. The development of spinning techniques required understanding of fiber properties and mechanical principles that influenced broader technological development. The spinning wheel innovation revolutionized textile production by dramatically increasing the speed and efficiency of thread creation while enabling individual workers to produce much larger quantities of yarn than had been possible with earlier hand-spinning techniques. This technological advance increased productivity while creating new economic opportunities for textile workers. The development of weaving techniques that interlace threads to create fabrics required the invention of looms and other specialized equipment that could maintain proper tension while enabling complex pattern creation. Weaving technology evolved from simple hand techniques to sophisticated mechanical systems that influenced the development of other manufacturing technologies. The natural dyeing processes that gave textiles their colors required extensive knowledge of plant chemistry, mineral properties, and treatment techniques that could produce stable, attractive colors that wouldn't fade or wash out. The development of dyeing expertise created specialized craftsmen while establishing some of the earliest chemical industries. The cotton cultivation that provided raw materials for textile production required agricultural innovations, including plant breeding, irrigation systems, and harvesting techniques that transformed the economies of entire regions while creating demand for labor that drove the expansion of slavery in many parts of the world. Cotton production became one of the most important agricultural activities in human history, while generating enormous wealth and suffering. The silk production that originated in ancient China required the domestication of silkworms and the development of complex processing techniques that remained closely guarded secrets for centuries. The silk trade created some of history's first global commercial networks, while generating enormous profits for societies that controlled production and distribution of this luxury material. The wool industry that developed around sheep herding created economic systems that influenced land use, social organization, and international trade for millennia. Wool production required specialized knowledge about animal husbandry, fiber processing, and fabric creation that made textile regions economically powerful while creating wealth that funded other forms of development. The linen production that utilized flax plants required agricultural and processing techniques that made this fabric particularly important in regions with suitable growing conditions. Linen production involved complex processing methods that transformed plant materials into fine fabrics suitable for clothing and household use while creating specialized industrial knowledge. The mechanization of textile production during the Industrial Revolution created the first modern factories, while demonstrating how technological innovation could dramatically increase productivity and reduce costs. The textile machinery developed during this period established principles of mass production that influenced all subsequent industrial development. The spinning jenny invention that enabled single operators to control multiple spinning mechanisms simultaneously represented a crucial step toward mechanized production, while creating new possibilities for textile manufacturing efficiency. This innovation reduced labor requirements while increasing output in ways that transformed textile economics. The water frame technology that used water power to drive spinning machinery enabled the creation of stronger, more consistent thread, while demonstrating how natural energy sources could be harnessed for industrial production. The water frame contributed to the factory system development while creating new forms of industrial organization. The power loom invention that mechanized weaving processes completed the mechanization of basic textile production, while enabling mass production of fabrics at scales that had never been achieved through hand production. Power looms transformed textile manufacturing while creating the foundation for modern industrial production methods. The cotton gin invention that mechanized the separation of cotton fibers from seeds dramatically reduced the labor required for cotton processing, while making cotton cultivation much more profitable. This technological breakthrough increased demand for slave labor while making cotton production economically dominant in the American South. The factory system that emerged around textile production created new forms of industrial organization that concentrated workers' machinery and production processes in specialized facilities designed for maximum efficiency. The textile factories became models for industrial organization while creating new social and economic relationships. The labor conditions in early textile factories were notoriously harsh, with workers, including children as young as 6, working 12 to 14 hours per day in dangerous conditions for minimal wages. The textile industry's treatment of workers became symbolic of industrial exploitation while generating enormous profits for factory owners. The child labor that characterized early textile production involved systematic exploitation of young workers who could operate machinery in confined spaces while earning minimal wages that helped support their families. Child labor in textile mills became one of the most visible injustices of early industrialization while enabling the low costs that made mass production profitable. The women's employment opportunities created by textile production provided new forms of economic independence, while often involving exploitation and dangerous working conditions. Textile work became one of the first industries to employ large numbers of women in factory settings, while creating new social and economic roles. The environmental impact of textile production included water pollution from dyeing processes, air pollution from factory operations, and resource depletion from intensive agriculture and manufacturing. The environmental cost of textile production increased dramatically with industrialization while creating problems that persist in contemporary manufacturing. The global trade networks that developed around textile production created some of history's most important commercial relationships while connecting distant regions through economic interdependence. Textile trade influenced exploration, colonization, and international relations while generating wealth that funded other forms of development. The colonial cotton production that supplied European textile mills was built on slave labor systems that generated enormous profits, while creating human suffering on unprecedented scales. The cotton trade became central to colonial economies, while providing raw materials that fueled European industrial development. The British textile industry dominance during the 18th and 19th centuries was built on colonial raw materials, technological innovation, and favorable trade policies that created competitive advantages while excluding other producers from global markets. British textile success funded imperial expansion while creating economic dependencies. The American textile industry development involved technology transfer from Britain, exploitation of natural resources, and the creation of industrial cities focused on textile production. American textile manufacturing created new forms of industrial organization while contributing to national economic development. The synthetic fiber development that began in the late 19th century created alternatives to natural materials, while demonstrating how chemical innovation could transform textile production. Synthetic fibers enabled new product possibilities while reducing dependence on agricultural raw materials. The chemical innovations required for synthetic fiber production advanced understanding of polymer chemistry while creating new industries focused on artificial materials. The development of synthetic fibers influenced both textile production and broader chemical industry development, while creating new technological capabilities. The automation technologies that continued to transform textile production throughout the 20th century reduced labor requirements while increasing production speed and consistency. Textile automation demonstrated how technological advancement could eliminate traditional jobs while creating new economic possibilities. The computer-controlled machinery that revolutionized modern textile production enabled precise control of manufacturing processes while reducing costs and improving quality. Computer integration in textile production demonstrates how digital technology can enhance traditional manufacturing while creating new capabilities. The global supply chains that characterize contemporary textile production connect raw material production, manufacturing, and retail distribution across multiple countries while creating complex economic relationships. Modern textile supply chains demonstrate both the benefits and problems of global economic integration while creating interdependencies that influence international relations. The fast fashion industry that emerged in the late 20th century created demand for rapidly changing textile products while putting enormous pressure on manufacturing systems to reduce costs and production time. Fast fashion demonstrates how consumer demand can drive industrial innovation while creating environmental and social problems. The environmental challenges posed by contemporary textile production include chemical pollution, water consumption, and waste generation that affect both manufacturing regions and global environmental systems. Modern textile production creates environmental problems that require new approaches to sustainable manufacturing. The labor conditions in contemporary textile manufacturing often replicate historical patterns of exploitation while creating new forms of industrial organization that maximize profits through cost reduction. Modern textile worker conditions in many regions remain problematic despite technological advancement and international awareness. The technological innovations that continue to transform textile production include new materials, manufacturing processes, and design capabilities that expand possibilities for textile applications. Contemporary textile technology influences fields ranging from fashion to medicine while creating new product categories. The sustainable textile production movement that has emerged in response to environmental and social concerns seeks to develop manufacturing methods that reduce negative impacts while maintaining economic viability. Sustainable textile production requires innovations in materials, processes, and business models while addressing complex global challenges. The recycled fiber technologies that enable reuse of textile materials demonstrate how circular economy principles can be applied to textile production while reducing waste and resource consumption. Textile recycling technologies offer possibilities for more sustainable production while creating new industrial capabilities. The biotechnology applications in textile production include genetically modified crops, enzyme processing, and biological manufacturing processes that could transform how textiles are produced. Biotechnology in textiles demonstrates how life sciences can enhance traditional manufacturing while creating new possibilities. The digital printing and customization technologies that enable on-demand textile production create possibilities for localized manufacturing while reducing inventory requirements and waste generation. Digital textile production demonstrates how information technology can transform traditional manufacturing while creating new business models. The smart textile development that integrates electronic components with fabric materials creates new product categories while demonstrating how convergence between different technologies can create innovative applications. Smart textiles influence fields including healthcare, sports, and military applications while expanding textile functionality. The nanotechnology applications in textile production enable new material properties, including stain resistance, antimicrobial effects, and enhanced durability, while demonstrating how materials science can enhance traditional products. Nanotechnology in textiles creates new capabilities while raising questions about safety and environmental impact. Understanding textile production history helps contemporary people appreciate both the remarkable technological achievements that created modern manufacturing capabilities and the human costs of systems that prioritized efficiency and profit over worker welfare and environmental protection. The legacy of textile production includes not just the technologies and economic systems that enable contemporary clothing and fabric production, but also the social movements, labour organisations, and regulatory frameworks that emerged in response to industrial exploitation and environmental damage. The continuing importance of textile production in the global economy demonstrates how traditional industries can evolve through technological innovation while addressing contemporary challenges, including sustainability, worker welfare, and environmental protection. Standing today in modern textile facilities or museums that preserve historic textile machinery, visitors can appreciate both the ingenuity that created increasingly sophisticated production methods and the human experiences of workers whose labour-powered industrial development, while often bearing the costs of technological progress. The textile industry reminds us that technological advancement creates both opportunities and challenges, generating wealth and capabilities, while often creating new forms of inequality and environmental damage that require ongoing attention and innovative solutions. The story of textile production continues to evolve as societies seek ways to meet human needs while addressing the complex consequences of industrial development. Conclusion. From the brutal training grounds of ancient Sparta to the global supply chains of modern textile production, these 5 journeys through history reveal how human societies have consistently pushed the boundaries of what individuals can endure, while creating systems that simultaneously inspire and destroy, elevate, and exploit those caught within them. The Agoge system that forged Spartan warriors demonstrated humanity's capacity to create extraordinary military effectiveness through systematic conditioning that eliminated childhood individuality and basic compassion. Their achievement reminds us that remarkable capabilities can be developed through intense focus and commitment, but that such achievements often come at costs that may not be justified by the results they produce. Jane Austen's hidden social commentary revealed how artistic genius can flourish within restrictive social systems while exposing the corruption and inequality that elegant surfaces often conceal. Her work challenges us to look beyond appearances while appreciating how creative intelligence can find ways to critique power, even when direct confrontation seems impossible. Persian Garden Paradises showed how human ambition can work with natural forces to create beauty and abundance even in hostile environments, demonstrating the possibilities for sustainable design that serves multiple purposes, including aesthetic pleasure, environmental management, and cultural expression. These gardens remind us that human creativity can enhance, rather than degrade, natural systems when guided by wisdom and long-term thinking. Medieval cathedral construction illustrated how communities can achieve extraordinary things when they commit to projects that serve purposes larger than individual benefit, creating architectural monuments that required faith, skill, and sacrifice across multiple generations. These projects demonstrate how shared vision can motivate sustained effort, even when rewards remain generations in the future. The evolution of textile production revealed how fundamental human needs can drive technological innovation that transforms entire civilizations while creating both prosperity and exploitation on unprecedented scales. This history shows how industrial development can generate remarkable capabilities while often failing to distribute benefits equitably or protect environmental and human welfare. These stories share common themes that illuminate enduring aspects of human nature: our remarkable capacity for achievement when circumstances demand excellence, our tendency to create systems that serve some needs while neglecting others, and our persistent struggle to balance individual welfare with collective goals. They reveal both the heights and depths of human potential, while showing how context shapes what people can accomplish and what they're willing to endure. Perhaps most importantly, these historical examples demonstrate that progress is neither automatic nor unambiguously beneficial, but requires conscious choices about what values to prioritize and what costs to accept. The societies that created Spartan warriors, Persian gardens, Gothic cathedrals, and industrial textile production all made deliberate decisions about how to organize human effort and what goals to pursue, with consequences that extended far beyond their original intentions. As we face contemporary challenges, including technological disruption, environmental crisis, social inequality, and global connectivity that creates both opportunities and vulnerabilities, These historical examples remind us that human societies have always faced complex trade-offs between competing values and goals. The specific challenges may be different, but the fundamental questions about how to organize collective effort and what purposes to serve remain constant. The Spartan warriors who sacrificed their humanity for military excellence, the Persian rulers who created garden paradises through sophisticated environmental management, the medieval communities that devoted generations to building cathedrals, and the textile workers who powered industrial development all faced versions of choices that we continue to confront. How much individual freedom should be sacrificed for collective achievement? What environmental and social costs are acceptable in pursuit of prosperity and progress? How can societies balance efficiency with justice, innovation with sustainability, individual opportunity with collective welfare? Their examples offer no simple answers, but they provide valuable perspectives on how human societies have approached these eternal questions while achieving remarkable things through systems that often demanded enormous sacrifices from those who served them. Understanding their achievements and their costs helps us make more informed decisions about our own priorities while appreciating both the possibilities and the dangers inherent in human social organization. In the end, these tales of endurance and achievement, beauty and brutality, innovation and exploitation remind us that being human means living with contradictions we cannot fully resolve, while striving to create meaning and value, despite the limitations and moral complexities that characterize all human endeavors. They challenge us to pursue excellence, while remaining mindful of its costs, to appreciate beauty, while understanding its foundations, and to work toward progress, while learning from the experiences of those who came before us. The legacy of these historical examples lies not in the specific institutions they created, but in their demonstration of human potential for both remarkable achievement and tragic failure, often within the same systems and sometimes within the same individuals. Their stories remind us that every advance carries risks, every system creates both opportunities and constraints, and every generation must find its own way of balancing the competing demands of survival, prosperity, justice, and meaning that define the human condition.